Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unpack complex ideas and find those surprising nuggets of knowledge hidden in the details. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a really fascinating corner of speculative fiction, Doug Brode's 2024 novel, Shelli, the Android Detective.
Yeah, this is one that really pushes us, I think. It makes you consider what it means to be human or, female, and how something or someone can evolve beyond their initial programming. We're looking at quite a lot of analysis here, exploring how Shelli, she's a synthetic investigator, how she navigates identity, gender, and purpose, all within this kind of hard-boiled police procedural setting.
Right. And we've gathered sources that get into the author's own intentions, look at how Shelley's character is actually built, and compare her to other iconic artificial women in sci-fi. And not just gynoids, but classic human detectives, too. Our mission today, really, is to uncover the sort of nuanced female perspective presented in this novel, and, importantly for you listening, what it might suggest about identity in a post-human world. Okay, so, to really get Shelli, we probably need to start with the creator, Doug Brode, and his past work. He's known for that 2009 HBO Cinemax series, Forbidden Science.
Ah, yes, Forbidden Science.
Which he himself described as, I think the quote was, a sexy sci-fi series with maybe more skin and grinding and moaning, etc., than he'd originally intended.
Well, and what's interesting there is how that past work really set up certain expectations for Shelli. Our sources show reviewers, they went in expecting something a bit more saucy, but they were apparently doubly surprised to find it wasn't some cyber smut with a mystery.
So what's the story there? I mean, why the shift? Brode explains that Shelli actually started way back as a screenplay in 2008, and the intention then was specifically to be without sex, but with all the ideas I couldn't fit within Forbidden Science's limited budget. But he said it just felt flat.
Right. It got shelved for, what, over a decade?
Yeah.
So the question is, what brought it back? What was the catalyst?
Well, according to Brode, it was a conversation he had in 2023 with his wife, actually.
Oh, interesting.
About the whole contemporary discussion around pronouns and self-identity.
Mm-hmm.
He says that conversation gave him the missing piece. It led to the novel's a very conceptual opening line. Shellin in it not a, she stood in a vast wheat field studying a farmhouse.
And that sentence, he says, in his own words, it's key to the entire narrative. It shifts the whole conflict away from, say, eroticism towards what did he call it, a philosophical and grammatical journey from object to subject.
Okay, but here's where it gets, well, a bit complicated. Despite consciously moving away from the cyber smut angle, he does include a scene with a centipede-like sex bot in a sex club.
Right. That scene.
He justifies it, saying it's world building, to show how extreme this was getting and provide some gritty fringe contrast. It feels a little like having his cake and eating it too.
That's a really sharp observation, and the sources do pick up on that. It suggests a kind of authorial ambivalence, maybe. Even while he's distancing the main story from his past work, he keeps a little vestige of that world, just for atmosphere. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Can an author ever fully break away from an aesthetic they're known for, even when they're aiming for something, loftier?
Good question. So, building on that, let's focus in on Shelli herself. The most, I'd say, radical choice is starting her off with the pronoun it. You see it in plot summaries all the time. Shelli finds itself wading into deep political waters. She's defined initially by purpose, just Homeland Security equipment.
Exactly. And that starting point, being an it, that really sets up her whole narrative arc. It's what everything else builds on. Reviewers seem to really respond to her progression and her finding humanity at the end. They talk about how she offers all the turmoil and mixed emotions that one finds in any believable human character.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this journey, from objectification towards a self-realized subjectivity, a philosophical shift, but also literally linguistic from it to she.
But okay, here's the tension right there. While that conceptual journey is pretty radical, her actual physical form is described as arrestingly attractive, which, immediately puts her in that somewhat problematic history of gynoids, female androids, often designed as objects for the male gaze. And the comparison people keep making to Jerry Ryan's 7 of 9 from Star Trek.
Boy,
It's really telling. Some reviewers even spotted word-for-word repeats of Seven's dialogue.
Oh, wow. Really? Word for word?
Apparently so.
That comparison is absolutely crucial then. 7 of 9 was famous for exactly that tension, this incredibly powerful, logical mind trapped in, well, a very sexualized body in that catsuit. So by bringing that comparison in so directly, the novel itself seems to highlight this dissonance, this clash. a progressive idea about fluid identity, but housed in a conventionally attractive, maybe even sexualized female body.
And the layers keep coming. Her name, Shelley, is an obvious nod to Mary Shelley, right? Author of Frankenstein.
Right, setting up that whole tradition.
Exactly. It frames her journey within that whole romantic idea of artificial beings wrestling with consciousness. She goes from this purely machine logical mind to feeling turmoil and mixed emotions.
Yep. And a key thing to think about here is how that happens. Her main job, her catalyst, is hunting its own kind as a Homeland Security investigator. That forces her, doesn't it, to confront the line between herself and these other defective machines. Now, her finding humanity is generally presented as a positive thing, but the analysis suggests it involves picking up traits often stereotyped as feminine or human-like emotion, while moving away from traits often coded as masculine, like pure logic or unwavering purpose. Which leads to a really interesting question for you, the listener, to ponder. Is this actual liberation for her, or is it more like assimilation into traditional ideas of femininity?
That's a great point. Okay, so we've looked at her author, her own character arc. Now let's place her in the bigger picture. How does she stack up against other iconic figures? Let's start with the other famous gynoids in fiction. How does Shelley compare to, say, Rachel from Blade Runner, or Ava from Ex Machina, or maybe Dolores from Westworld?
Okay, good comparisons. Let's take Rachel first. Her whole tragedy is that she doesn't know she's artificial, right? Her memories are implants. Shelley, though, she knows she's synthetic from the get-go. Her crisis isn't what she is, it's about who she can choose to become. It's presented more as an evolution, not like Rachel's disillusionment.
Okay, and Ava?
Ava from Ex Machina is fascinating because she manipulates her way to freedom. She plays on human emotion, then abandons her supposed savior. Very ruthless, very individualistic. Shelley's awakening is different. It comes through her work, through investigation, and really importantly, through partnership. Her ethical development seems collaborative, not achieved by manipulation.
And then there's Dolores from Westworld, the victim who becomes a revolutionary, aiming for, well, violent overthrow of the humans.
Right, and Shelley is almost the opposite there. She works within the system. She's a Homeland Security agent. Her job is to uphold order. Her awakening makes her apply her function more humanely, maybe more ethically, but it's not a rebellion against the system itself.
So, looking at the bigger picture then, her path to consciousness seems uniquely collaborative.
I think that's a really good way to put it. Her humanity seems to emerge through her partnership with the human character, Jake August, not through some lonely crisis or manipulation like Ava, or outright war like Dolores.
But does that, I don't know, does that make her less radical?
Well, that's the question the analysis raises, isn't it? Does this collaborative path maybe offer a less challenging vision of post-human liberation? Could she be seen as a kind of model minority figure? Meaning she gains acceptance by fitting in, by assimilating, by serving the dominant culture represented by Homeland Security and her human partner, rather than trying to dismantle the power structures like Ava or Dolores arguably do.
That's a really provocative thought. Okay, let's switch tracks slightly. Let's look at her purely as a detective figure. How does an android detective like Shelley compare to some iconic human female detectives? Maybe someone like Clarice Starling from The Silence of the Lambs, or Sarah Linden from The Killing.
Okay, good examples again. Clarice Starling, her story is so much about navigating the intense sexism within the FBI, right?
Yeah.
Her gender, her background, they're constant sources of vulnerability, things she has to overcome. For Shelley, her primary otherness isn't social prejudice based on gender, it's her non-humanity. Her professional challenges come from being a machine. It shifts the focus from social bias to, like, the difference in being itself.
And Sarah Linden from The Killing.
Yeah.
She's all messy humanity, isn't she? Trauma, emotional baggage, complicated relationships.
Exactly. She's defined by all that from the start. Shelley begins as her polar opposite. No past, no family history, no emotional baggage to weigh her down. She's the clean slate investigator. So her whole character arc is actually about acquiring the very human complexities, the messiness, the emotions that define someone like Linden right from episode 1.
Now, something I found really interesting in the analysis was the use of the buddy cop framework, the classic mismatched partner.
Oh, yeah, it's the buddy cop trope.
Yeah, but it's inverted here, isn't it? Shelley is the hyper-competent one, the seasoned investigator with the machine logical mind who apparently never fails. And her partner, Jake August, he's the newbie, the young analyst who's never even fired a gun, and at first kind of resents working with synthetics.
That's right. And reviewers do note that Jake's character grows as the story goes on, and that growth is explicitly catalyzed by Shelley. Now, on the surface, that seems progressive, doesn't it? putting the female-coded character in the position of authority and competence.
It does.
But it does make you ask, as some sources do, does this risk making Shelley's main narrative function about helping the male character mature? Does it subtly subordinate her own deeper journey of becoming, making it secondary to his coming-of-age story?
That's a very subtle but important point. And if we connect that back, her initial expertise, her competence, it's tied directly to her being a machine, right? Her logic, her lack of emotion, her focus traits, often coded as masculine. So as she develops the turmoil and mixed emotions, as she moves towards humanity, which, as we noted, involves traits often coded as feminine, doesn't that implicitly complicate the very source of your professional skill?
It certainly seems to suggest a subtle equation, doesn't it? Competence is linked to this defeminized, maybe even masculinized machinic state, while her humanity, her growth, is linked to acquiring these feminine-coded emotions. And there's another layer, too. By making the super competent female partner a non-human android, maybe the narrative is kind of strategically sidestepping the really complex social and sexual dynamics you'd get in a purely human partnership.
Like a buffer.
Exactly, like a buffer.
Yeah.
Her non-humanity allows for a safer exploration of these reverse gender roles, perhaps without having to directly confront the messy politics of actual gender dynamics in a human workplace.
So wrapping this all up, what's the big picture takeaway, Shelley? The android detective is clearly ambitious. Brode definitely makes a conscious shift away from the eroticism of forbidden science. He centers it on identity, on pronouns, and he does that clever inversion of the buddy cop dynamic.
Absolutely. But as the analysis suggests, it still seems kind of tethered to more conventional frameworks in some key ways. That arrestingly attractive physical form links her right back to the problematic history of the male gaze. Her journey towards humanity seems to equate humanity with stereotypically feminine emotions, which raises those questions about liberation versus assimilation.
Right.
And her role, fundamentally, is as a state agent who finds fulfillment within the existing system. That makes her more a figure of reform, maybe, than revolution, especially compared to characters like Dolores.
So ultimately, Shelley feels like maybe a transitional figure. Is that fair?
I think that's a very good way to describe her. She's clearly not just the sexualized fembot stereotype, nor is she purely a tragic victim, but she's also perhaps not a fully liberated, system-challenging posthuman figure either. She finds her identity through collaboration by becoming a more empathetic tool for the system, rather than fundamentally challenging what humanity itself means.
It sounds, in a way, more like Isaac Asimov's The Bicentennial Man, an android learning how to be a better human.
Yeah. That's a great comparison, actually, rather than a story that truly shakes up our definition of what humanity is or could be. So its real contribution, perhaps, is less in the answers it gives and more in the really provocative questions it makes us ask about this emerging genre, the posthuman police procedural.
So this deep dive leaves you with a final thought to maybe mull over. If finding humanity means embracing emotional complexity, does that always have to mean conforming to our existing human definitions of gender? Or could there be a truly new, genuinely post-human form of identity out there, one that maybe transcends those old binaries?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep deep diving.